Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. It's been a week since we last spoke, so you know what that means, folks. We're a week nearer Scottish independence, and I look forward to it as much as you. Got a lot to cover today. The big story, it's everywhere, isn't it, is the Syrian story, and I want to cover that because it's important that we look at that through a Scottish prism, and how it affects us and how it could affect us. But I want to look behind that as well. And other things I'd like to cover, the continuity bill is certainly one of them, and referendum date. So Syria, it is a really bizarre what's going on here. It reminds me actually of a story. A pal of mine who went to his doctor's having bronchitis, and his doctor said to him, "Well, I'll tell you what, you're going to have to stop smoking." He said, "Well, you think that's what's causing it, doctor?" And he went, "Oh, yeah, absolutely, it's your smoking." He said, "That's funny, I've never had a cigarette in my life." But, you know, anything you go with, it's down to smoke, it's down to drinking, it's down to your way of life. And it's the same from our government. Dishonest lies all the time. We've had, you know, the weapons of mass destruction in 45 minutes, Tony Blair and Alistair Campbell. We had the daily lies we get, as we know, every day on the BBC, ITV, Channel 4 and through the mainstream media. They're lying to us all the time. We had this bizarre incident in Salisbury, which is getting more bizarre as the week goes on, where, for example, they've both recovered, the policeman's recovered, the other people that were injured, no one knows anything about them or what happened, and suddenly Yulia, who is a Russian citizen, let's remember that she's a Russian citizen, who has given it in perfect English, you could say possibly written for her, a statement saying that she doesn't want any help from her own government, she doesn't want to see her cousin or her family, and she wants to go to a secure location under the protection of the British spooks. It doesn't make sense. And meantime, quietly, what's come out this week was a statement from the OPCW, the people who oversee globally all the chemical warfare, weapons, etc., rather. And they said that this substance that they've been given to test the sample from Salisbury, they can't identify where it came from, no more than could Porton Down. Which again just confirms that our Foreign Secretary lied. Our government lied to us again. It's blatant. And now we're meant to believe this latest one of what's going on in Syria, that there's been this attack of chemical weapons. And several things about this too, ladies and gentlemen, just do not add up and do not make sense. Some of you may have seen it going over social media, where President Obama was getting interviewed, and he confirmed that Syria had got rid of their chemical weapons. Now, he knew that because as the ex-president for 8 years, he had all that information to hand, and he knew that Syria didn't have weapons of chemical nature. And we know from the Salisbury incident that the OPCW informed us that Russia, after signing an agreement with America, the United States of America, they had got rid of all their chemical weapons as well. And the OPCW confirmed that. So Syria couldn't have been restocked by the Russians, as some people are trying to make you believe. But we're still, looks like we're going to go to war. They're not going to recall Parliament. And the evidence stacks up more and more that this is debatable whether Syria did it. And there was another one tonight, again, some of you may have seen it on the television, where General Jonathan Shaw, he's an ex-commander of the British forces in Iraq, a senior British officer, and Sky News got him on to ask him about, you know, this latest bit of jingoism. They love a bit of jingoism in the old Sky, going to bomb Syria. And General Shaw said, well, he found it quite strange because the war, as far as he can see in this battle, is over, and the Russians and the Syrian forces have won. And he, from a military point of view, he said, and couldn't think of a political reason, why they would suddenly now use chemical weapons. It didn't make sense. Now, he was only a minute into his interview with Sky, 1 minute and 11 seconds, and they went, oh, fine, off, closed them down, because he wasn't giving them the the message, the narrative, or if you prefer, the lies that they wanted to hear. There was also earlier in the week Erik Sellstrom, a Scandinavian UN weapons inspector, who said there's no sign of a chemical attack. There's no symptoms. There's nothing to show that there has been any kind of chemical attack there at all that he can see. Now that's it. We know what happened to Dr. David Kelly, who was a UN inspector. So be careful, Mr. Sellstrom. You're not giving them what they want to hear. But you have to ask yourself, why would the Americans in particular and the British want to get involved in all this? Well, there was another thing that was, you just think about. I'm not one for conspiracy theories, as you know. However, there's a couple of things that just catch my eye. What's going on? I mean, I don't know how many of you know that Syria is the only significant crude oil producing country in the Eastern Mediterranean, and that countries include Jordan, Lebanon, Israel, and the Palestine territories. And according to the Oil and Gas Journal, Syria has 2.5 billion barrels of petroleum reserves. That was as of January 2010. And obviously with the civil war and everything that's going on there, it's hard to update that. But at that time, they had that amount of reserves. Now, the countries round about them I've mentioned, Jordan, Lebanon and Israel, they don't have any. However, here's another strange thing, and I'm sure just a coincidence, isn't it? Israel's got an oil drilling company, and the Golan Heights is where most of this oil is, or a great deal of the oil is, that the Syrians have. And the Israelis would like to get in there. They've got a company called Genie Energy, which has a subsidiary in Israel called Attic. That's I think AFEC in Israel. But it's not that. It's just to let you know, some of the people who are in charge of the Genie Energy company. You have got Howard Jonas is the CEO, a big donor in American terms, and to Netanyahu. Avi Golden is the CFO. Michael Steen is the CEO, as vice chairman. The president of its Israeli subsidiary, Efi Etam, Jenny Ennis, he's the top guy. But on the advisory board, you've got Dick Cheney, former Vice President of the United States of America. We know what he got up to in Iraq and how much money his company made out of that. Rupert Murdoch, James Woolsey, the former CIA director, Larry Summers, the former head of the US Treasury, Bill Richardson, a former governor of the New Mexico and an ex-ambassador to the United Nations, and he was also a United States Energy Secretary, and Michael Steinhardt and Jacob Rothschild. Now, they're all on the board of this company in Israel that wants to drill in the Golan Heights, which of course, like Palestine, is captured territory. And we're going into Syria, apparently, along with our Americans, to punish them for allegedly using chemical weapons on their own citizens and killing several. But also this week, we watch, I'm sure all of you watched it as well in Israel, where snipers were situated and they were taking out unarmed civilians who were doing peaceful demonstrations. They were getting shot through the head and the Israelis were cheering and shouting. But you've got to watch now, because as we know, there's been a campaign. If you say anything about the state of Israel, you're immediately accused of anti-Semitism. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-any. In fact, I've got no time for any religions. I'm a good old atheist. I think, anyone, my invisible friend in the sky is better than your invisible friend in the sky, and because of that, I'm going to kill all you people, and all my people are going to kill your people, and your people are going to kill my people, because we've got a great invisible friend. So I've got no time for any religion. So I'm not anti any religion, but I am anti people who are shooting unarmed civilians. I remember the children on the beach playing football who get targeted and killed. We've seen atrocities left, right and centre. The Israelis daily break UN resolutions and nothing happens to them. They have committed atrocities that are just they're reminiscent of, the abused has become the abuser. And I remember watching the film of the Schindler's List where the Ralph Fiennes guy took out his rifle and was a sniper and was just shooting inmates as they walked across the compound in the concentration camp. And here we have, I'm watching this week on my television, I'm watching Israeli soldiers, snipers, shooting unarmed people walking across the desert. Well, of all people that shouldn't be doing this, you would think, but hey, that's what's been happening. And you ask, why are they going for Syria as well, apart from the oil? That would be a conspiracy. Syria has got oil and gas reserves, we know that. They dropped using the dollar. They're probably going to be part of the Russian, I talked about last week, and the petrol yuan. The state bank is state-owned. There's no Rothschild in central bank. The Syria has no IMF debt, and Syria borders Israel and has been an enemy of Israel and at war with Israel since 1947. And it would be very convenient for Israel if Syria was imploded, was out of the way, and they could get access to their oil reserves. Because meanwhile, what's actually happening at the moment, and again, which has been hidden behind all this, and people are not hearing about it, is that in the Palestine-occupied territories, the last power station has run out of fuel, and the Israelis are not allowing any more fuel in. So hospitals are closing, schools are closing, the water's getting contaminated, there's no electricity. It's appalling. And, it's like they've got the people in a ghetto. Sound familiar? They're shooting them, unarmed civilians. Sounds familiar. And these people can't fight back. They can't do anything. And meanwhile, the world, America feels so affronted. They're going to blow these people and create more refugees, which then Donald Trump and his Republicans will not allow into the United States because they don't like refugees. But they're so concerned about people being killed in Syria that they want to take action. But they don't have any concern for Palestinians getting murdered, executed. I mean, that's all it is. It's state execution. If you're shooting unarmed people using snipers from a long distance, that's murder. But it doesn't seem that America, the United Nations, or the British, or the world wants to do anything about that. And I find that appalling. We have to believe that the Syrians are the bad guys and the Israelis are the good guys. Well, that's not how I see it. But hey, who am I? I'm just a wee Scots guy. And I think that I hope by the time this goes out that we've not already attacked Syria, but it's looking much like it. They're talking about the biggest fleet, armada since the Iraq War has been assembled by the Americans and sent out, and the British are going to like the wee cowardly, the bully at school and the wee cowardly pal behind him who would wait till the bully done it and he would come in and give a quick hit as well. That's really, it's embarrassing. It's ridiculous, and it's not in my name. And I would say to them, I don't want to see this happening. I think it's appalling, and I hope it doesn't go ahead. But I'm afraid to say, I think it will be, and there's not a lot we can do about it. But apart from this, why would Trump and May want to do this? Because both of them are in huge trouble at home. He's heading towards impeachment. He's wanting to get rid of the special prosecutors, getting closer and closer. Trump's calling his special prosecutor a gangster. He's an organised crime gangster because he's coming after him and finding more and more things about him. We know Theresa May is going from one disaster to the next disaster. And this week, again, there's 2 or 3 things that people have got their eye off the ball and are not watching. Is that the Irish question, the Irish border question, which I've been saying to you, as you know, for a long while, is the Achilles heel in all of this thing for Brexit. And David Davis has come out and he's trying to blame the Taoiseach in Ireland and the Irish people for this problem. It's not Brexit, it's not the Europeans, it's certainly not the Tory party, it's everyone else's fault but the Tory party and the British government. They're trying to blame them for the mess that they have created. And it just won't wash, folks. I've said to you all along, this if Ireland stands up to them, which I think they will. I mean, the Irish have waited 500 years for this moment, and they've got the chance to put them in place, and I think they will. And it means hard Brexit. It's bad for us, but it's hard Brexit. Who's now talking about the fishermen? the fishermen have been betrayed and sold down the river, but because of all this that's going on with Syria and Skirple and Salisbury, it's all off the radar. It's just not going on. And lo and behold, the other one that's happening next week, our wee Fluffy Mandel, the man who's meant to be Scotland's representative in London, but we know he's London's representative in Scotland, who has visions of himself being a Governor-General of Scotland, is going to challenge our government's continuity bill in the Supreme Court in England. It looks as if they're going to do the same with the Welsh one as well. And he said, it's no big deal, it's just procedure. Really, is it? Procedure? That's what they'll say. That's what they'll say about everything. And nah, don't worry about it. It's just tidying up loose ends. They're out to steal our democracy, folks. And we've got to stop it. We really have got to stop it, and we'll not stop it by talking to each other on social media. He said talking on social media. But we have to get out there and do whatever we can to stop them. The two things with this, if the British government win this case, then our democracy, our Holyrood is under immense threat, ladies and gentlemen. Don't kid yourself on. That's exactly what will happen. To be under a tremendous threat of closure, of being neutered, because you'll have seen, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it's doing the rounds, is the famous thing from the Constitution Reform Group, with people like Minging Campbell, Peter Haynes on it. But one of the name that caught my eye is this. It's with Companies House as a director, called Robert Michael James Gascoigne Cecil, the 7th Marquess of Salisbury, Eton Tory, net worth of 335 million, and he's one of the ones that have written this. And I'm sure you've seen the things going round. What they're talking about doing is making a second chamber for the devolved Parliament. So every bill that we pass would then have to get approval, firstly of the Secretary of State as the British government's representative, and if he did, it would then have to go to Parliament, and they would be the second chamber, and they would decide if we passed a law, if it was going to be allowed, if it was in the interest of the United Kingdom. All local authorities will have to answer to the United Kingdom. The Queen, the royal prerogative will be kept in place so that they can alter bills that they don't like. In effect, we are then a colony. We have no democracy. And they're talking about, we have to have Brexit because the people have spoken. 52 to 48. We had, 79% people who voted for this Holyrood Parliament and devolution. They're just going to ignore that. They're going to ignore the 62% who said that they wanted to remain in the European Union. Because democracy only appeals to the right wing, and not just in the UK, but throughout the world. But let's just keep in the UK when they get the result they like. Because, forever and a day, the 2014 result will be used. That's the settled will. We don't need to change it. That's it. You've decided. So we can do what we like to, as often as we like, and when we like. Well, I say, no, you can't. And I think there's a fair amount of people out there in Scotland who will say the same. And we've got to make our voice heard, because the only way we can do this is to have a referendum. That's what we've got to do. It's the only way to stop them. And because they're endangering not just our democracy, and with Syria they're endangering our lives, because if they prod the big Russian bear too much, we needn't worry about the continuity bill or having a referendum, because if this war escalates, ladies and gentlemen, where is the biggest target in the UK? Just think about it. It's scary. We might not have anything to get independent the time this is all over, because a guy with an orange face and a horrible wig in Washington, and a woman with no spine, no backbone, no brains, want to play soldiers. So we have to do all we can to stop this escalating, and we've got to do all we can to get our independence. There's many things coming up soon. I know Hoop started it, as I've said. We've got All Under One Banner coming next month, and also we've got the March in The Hague next month. But the one thing I'm noticing online is that the grassroots are getting anxious. They want to get moving. They want to get this referendum and get it on the plate. Now, I don't know when it's going to happen. You all know when I think it should be. Whether it can be logistically or whether it will be remains to be seen. I've made my position clear. I'll fight it whenever and wherever it comes, but I think it has to be over a summer campaign, or if we're not, people would say March. I did a poll. Angus McNeil, as you know, did a poll, and it showed that over 80% of people want to have it within the next 18 months. So I narrowed it down beyond 18 months and offering autumn this year, March and June. And the winner, there was about 1,400 of you voted on it, and it was like 42% wanted March, 36% wanted, or 37% wanted autumn, and the rest were for June. Well, I would suggest that, I accept that's what people have said, but I would say that March is the worst possible option for us, because, as I've said before, and I'll say again, I've written about it as well, we don't want to be doing a winter campaign. And January, February, fighting a referendum is not to our advantage. So if it isn't in the autumn of this year, then I would suggest that June next year. But then we're out the EU. They may stop. They may have by that time put in place so that the EU nationals can't vote. They may have taken away our right to even hold this. So we have to get a move on and get something in the statute and get it whenever. Even if the date's not confirmed, we have to get something done. And that is me running out of time. And it always flies in when I'm talking to you, and it's a pleasure talking to you. I would say that tomorrow, on Sunday, I will have, as my special guest, I've got James Dornan, which great interview, don't miss it. That's on from noon tomorrow. And I'll be back next week. Until then, all of you, take care now. We'll see you then. Bye.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.